Oh, come behold the works of God, the nations at his feet.
Welcome to Calvary Chapel Corinth with Senior Pastor Charlie Villard. Our desire is to comfort those in any affliction with the comfort by which we ourselves have been comforted by God. We are blessed to have you join us today as we dig into God's Word, chapter by chapter, verse by verse.
We, continuing on in the story of Joseph, we kind of just depart for a minute, and it's an interesting thing, and much has been made about this chapter and over the years how I've been taught it and studied through it, and different biblical, scholars. I think sometimes they get some things wrong in here that I don't think it's what God intended it for, but we're going to make our way through it, and I'll try not to do it without my face getting red. Chapter 38, Genesis. Verse 1, it came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he married her and went into her. She conceived and bore a son, and they called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Chezib, and when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to Onan, go in to your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that heir would not be his, and it came to pass that when he went into his brother's wife, he emitted on the ground, lest he should give her an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers in Timnah, and he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And he was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah and to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned to her by the way and said, please let me come in to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, what will you give me, that I may come in to you? And he said, I will send a young goat from the flock. So she said, will you give me a pledge till you send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give you? So she said, your signet and cord, and your staff that is in your hand. And he gave them to her, and went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away, and laid aside her veil, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adulamite, and received his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of the place, saying, where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. So she returned to Judah. And said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said, there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. It came to pass about 3 months after that, Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out, and let her be burned. When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whom these belong, I am with child. She said, please determine who these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. So Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her Shelah my son. And he never knew her again. Now it came to pass at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in the womb. And so it was, when she was giving birth, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took the scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened, as she drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly, and said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. So, some cool things in this chapter. It's a weird one, as Pastor Chuck calls it, the most salacious chapter, apart from the Song of Solomon. We've been following along. We know basically from the last chapter, when Joseph was sold off as a slave, it was Judah who suggested that, right? They wanted to murder him ultimately, and then Judah was able to convince them, let's just sell him off into slavery. And so we pick back up somewhere along the story here, right? Because as we ended chapter 38, Joseph was sold to Potiphar as a slave. However, we either during this time or sometime later, as they cross paths, as the timelines cross, it says it came to pass at that time that Judah had departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. So Judah he's not really done anything at this point from our studying here, or right from Scripture, with his life, and he should go do something, right? He should have been married or become something in business, or do something with his name. And as he leaves, he visits a certain Adullamite, a friend in Canaan, whose name was Hira, and Judah saw a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. Now, going back through history, right, what was the thing that Isaac was to stay away from, right? The Canaanite women and the Canaanite people were known as a culture that was, liberal and progressive and really actually full of harlots and prostitutes, and they lived the way of the world. So we also know that Judah spent some time there, right? They ultimately got sucked into society there for a time period, and their father Jacob, spent too much time. He stopped there, though God told him not to. Right? He told him to continue on to go where the land is that he was going to give him. So Canaanite women, unfortunately, represent, an idolistic society. But they're clearly an attractive type society, because we find ourselves here again, and, Judah sees her and he marries her and likely pulls him further away from where he should be. Now, he's already sort of lost in sin, because ultimately he's probably riddled with guilt for selling off his brother. But he meets this certain Canaanite woman whose name is Shua, and he marries her, and he went into her. They have sexual relations as husband and wife, and she bears him a son, and his name is called And she conceived again and bore another son, and she called him Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chizib when she bore him. So they've got 3 kids now, right? Some time has passed. And that's easily, 3-4 years. He's been living there. It says in verse 6 that Judah then took a wife for So now it's really down the road, right? So he'd be 13, 14 years old culturally. So now we're, 14 years into this. And Judah gets a wife, a Canaanite woman likely. Doesn't say, but given where they're at. But it says, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. So it's not totally clear, right? We could surmise that maybe he was doing the same exact thing here that his brother will do to Tamar, and really not bearing her a child or children, right? That is his role and responsibility, his wickedness, and likely that'd be the case. There's not an exact, it doesn't say it here in Scripture exactly, apart from what happens to his other brothers, or his other brother. It says, and Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. Well, culturally, this is what happened, right? If a woman marries into a family, she's in that family. And if the brother is to die, then the next aged brother, the next youngest, would go in, become her husband, and he would give her a child, and they would raise up that child like it was his brother's. So, because that was the husband of her first wife, and we see some of that in the book of Ruth, this same sort of the cultural pattern. But ideally, he's going to marry her because that's his obligation, and then he's going to give her a child. But Onan, he's a bit different. It says that, but Onan, that knew that the heir would not be his, and it came to pass that when he went in to his brother's wife, that he admitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. Ultimately, I think what we would find is was probably the same way, but they're just using her for sex. Right? He's not finishing the obligation the way that he should, and allowing the Lord to do the work, right, of bearing children. And we saw it way back. My picture on some of these things has shifted a bit. Like, this is not the birth control method, right? And ultimately, there's a lot of people that, when dealing with the subject of masturbation, they'll come back to this chapter and say, it's wicked, God will strike you down, and this is the proof. This is not why this is not this subject, right? There's other things that can tackle the subject of masturbation and sex and things like that, but he's not following the cultural process that has been set up by the founding fathers, right? Like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their culture of the nation of Israel, of taking over and doing what was necessary. So God striking him down because he's really just, one, not following what what the plan was here for him to help her bear children under his brother's name, and secondarily, he's just using her even in marriage, right? He's using her for sex and not making the commitment that he is to make. It says in the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. It says, then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. Right? So he is obviously a bit younger. Said it could be a decade or two, right? It could be up to 20 years younger than his other brothers. So there's this gap where he's like, hey, look, my son's really not old enough yet. There's gonna be a even longer gap, because even when he was of age, he wasn't given to her. He says, just wait, be a widow until then. So she has these widow garments, and she's gonna live the life of a widow. One, waiting for her husband, and two, waiting for children. Her purpose is not the right word. And being a mother, culturally for her, would be what she's waiting on, right? To be a wife and a mother. She's not been able to do that now twice. So I'd say it's safe surmising from this that because God has killed both of the sons, and this is what Judah's concern is, that they were both not great people and using, her just for pleasure. And unfortunately, the dad's going to do the same thing. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went in and dwelt in her father's house. So she's going to live there, living as a widow. Now, in the process of time, in verse 12, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers in Timnah, he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. So he's still friends with this guy. And ultimately, they're going to now make this travel. They're going to visit the sheep shearer. It's that season where they're going to, gather from the sheep that have grown. I don't know why I can't even think of what are they? Wool. Thank you. My word. I don't like. Why can I not think of that word right now? Wool. And it's also going to be nearing a season. This is going to be a similar season to a mating season, right? So they're going to go, and there's this ritual that we're going to see in a second, but ultimately they're going to, get back on everything that's grown, and then ultimately they're going to be hoping for a good season of young sheep, lambs. So in 13 it says, and it was told to Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself. So she's got a plan here, right? She's been waiting for the son, right, to be your husband. And he's headed off on a journey. So she's like, well, he's gone. He's not going to be giving it to me now. Who knows how long it's going to be. She comes up with a plan. So she takes off her widow's garments. She covers herself with a veil and wrapped herself and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah. So she's familiar culturally with what's about to occur, right? She knows what's going to happen. So she's going and prepped with a plan to, we'll see in a second. For she thought that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. She saw. So she's like, hey, what's going on here? Well, I would like a child. That's, women were measured by childbearing. We saw that with Sarah. And she but she would be seen as a lesser wife because she couldn't bear children. And it was just, at the time, right, culturally, it was the woman that was the problem. So she wants to have a child, even if in the wrong way. she was not given to him as a wife. And then in 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she had her face covered. Then he turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was a daughter-in-law. So there's this, these are obviously hormonal men, and most of us, morons, we fall into these things, right? At the time, they thought, it's like there's this thing where, you bring your sheep, they get sheared, you're going to be going into baby season and mating season. If you sleep with a wife or sleep with a woman, then that somehow might boost your chances of getting good offspring for your sheep. Weird, really just an excuse to sleep with a prostitute. So he sees her and he's like, "Hey, look, this is the woman, I think. I can't see her face, it's covered, but she's probably the one." So he says to her, "Hey, please let me come into you. Let me be with you while I'm here." For he did not know that it was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And she's smart, right? She knows that she needs to get something in return if he's gonna do that. And he says that, "I'll send you a young goat from the flock." So he's hoping that this ritual thing here is going to ultimately land him young, right? And then a young flock, and then he's going to send one back to her. She's even smarter, right? She says, "What will you give me? Will you give me a pledge until you send it?" Right? She wants something that says, well, I'm going to get out of this what I should get out of it in return, right? Because if I'm going to do this, I'm going to give you this. I want something in return. This is an interesting thing as we think about it, right? We're in a weird culture. It's been happening for 40, 50 years, where men are expecting out of women in relationships, right? Unmarried, just go ahead and date, whatever, to have sex with them. And the culture has kind of dictated that, right? Like, well, how are you going to know if you're compatible, right? You got to know what you're into. You got to know if you guys like the same things. Maybe you like the same taste of music. And ultimately, if you have any sexual chemistry. What's even crazier is the lengths that men and women go to get this, especially women today, young ladies, young girls. I mean, social media is full of it, right? Wearing scantily clad things, attracting attention and money and men. And for that matter, you have things like OnlyFans, right? Used to be, part of our pornography was taboo. To get it, you had to know someone. Then eventually it was, you could get it in magazine format and it was hidden on bookshelves. And that's when bookstores really were popular. And then the internet comes along and you can just get it for free. And you can use it all you want, right? And now kids are walking around with unfiltered phones and it's just free access to everything. But it isn't just hardcore pornography that's the problem, right? What women have starting to realize is that I can be my own, and this is their thought is, and I watch girls talk about this stuff on YouTube, and you get interviews with them, and they're like, well, no, I can be my own superstar. I can have my own OnlyFans, and people will pay me $5 a month, and actually, there's I can't think of her name. She did an interview with Lecrae, and she talked about it. She was one of the biggest OnlyFans stars online, and she got saved ultimately. She was dating a guy, and he didn't really know who she was, apparently, and he was a Christian. Not really the way to be doing this, but she's gotten saved, and she started to come out against all of it, and she's telling her story. I'm not really sure when I listen that she really truly understands what it's like to live, as a Christian. She debated Charlie Kirk recently on one of those college campuses, which was, I don't know if you ever watch him do any of that stuff. I absolutely love Charlie Kirk. He came to Orrington some years back. He's a super cool guy. Taught there and hung out there. But he's, what she talked about it's this give and take thing. It's like, look, I'll take off my clothes, or I'll give provocative pictures, and you'll pay me by getting a subscription. And if you want more than that, you can ask me for it, and then you'll pay me for that, right? So these girls are going, hey, look, I can be a mogul, an internet superstar, and I can be a self-made woman making all this money. But you're giving something every time. They go, well, yeah, I am, but that's just sex. and it's just attention. I'm getting money in return, and somehow that has been an equivalent. I think we're at a real dangerous place in our culture when it comes to internet and children. And for that matter, thank God, President Trump and Melania Trump, I posted the video back last week, maybe. They really are cracking down on this revenge porn where, a guy can take a video of a girl and then put it up on the internet if she breaks up with him. But girls, I'm looking at a room full of mostly women tonight, and it's really hard to, I know you all are like, godly ladies, but girls are looking for attention, right? They want to be loved. They want someone to love them. And boys, convinced that love equals sex, which it doesn't, right? It's not the same thing. And then they take from them and they go, well, what do I get in return? It used to be, if you wanted to even hold a hand of a lady, go to the dad, you talk to him, you have your crap together, you have a job, you're ready to get married, and ultimately you marry them. And then you get access to those things, but you have given a promise in return. Today, the promise is like, well, yeah, we'll get married one day. Or, hey, look, I know I'm good looking and I just want to hang out with you. And, if you want to Netflix and chill and do all the things that the culture is doing, then, if you want to be cool, then you got to give me something. And most women are giving it out without ever getting anything in return now. And that's the problem. And they just get used. And what's happened is this shift where, and well, you know what? I'm actually just thinking about it. I blame it on today's culture, but we see it even here. It's even here in Judah's world. He wants to use a woman for sexual pleasure. And she's saying, well, what are you going to give me in return for me giving you this? Right? I was raised with this mindset that when a woman is with a man, she gives him something. Right? She allows him into her and allows him to get sexual gratification, but at the same time, she's connecting. You cannot stop chemistry, right? You can't. No matter what you think, no matter what you do, where people go, well, I can separate sex from love. No, you cannot, right? Sex doesn't equal love, but you can't separate the two. That union of bodies produces chemical things, dopamine, oxytocin, right? The bonding agent to love someone. It's designed this way. And Judah here going against God's design as much as we're doing today. And look, I'm guilty of that too. We lived unmarried for nearly 10 years. Anyway, so we have this thing where he's been influenced by the culture, but at the same time, he's a man. He's no longer married. He doesn't have a wife. So he's going to use this time to pick up a harlot and have sex with her. And she's going, well, you're going to have to give me something. And not just a promise of something. I need a pledge that you're going to do what you say you do. She's a smart woman. She's probably been watching the culture all these years, thinking about how is it that I get the things that I want and I deserve. She culturally deserves the son and a child so that she can bear children and give back. So he says to her, what pledge shall I give you? This is so like a guy too, right? Like, I'll give you anything you want. I'll love you forever. It's like, a woman today should go, yeah, I want a ring on this finger, knowing if I know you're the one, and I want to get married before you have access to any of that for me, right? And people go, well, that's so old-fashioned. No, it's smart, actually. If you take the biblical aspect of it all out of it, which you shouldn't, but if you were to set that aside and you just look at the act of sex and the way that people are living today, one, it's not safe as a culture. Right? There's sexual transmitted diseases running rampant here. Secondarily, you're allowing someone to get pleasure off of you, you should get something in return. Right? Even if it's not totally sexual pleasure. Most people are saying, it's fine, I'll just take money, or you'll pay my bills. Or, hey, look, I'll give you whatever you want, and you let me be your girlfriend. You're rich, and you're, you got all kinds of stuff. You'll give me all the things that I want. But we've gotten away from any of that to the point where people will just freely give that back and forth. And then now, instead of it being a shameful thing, now people are talking about it as guys used to do in a locker room. Like, oh, how many people have you been with? Oh, I've been with 50. Right? And, the hard part is what's going to happen and what's happening is a good man that loves a woman doesn't want to be with a woman who's slept with 50 people or 100 people or been on the internet. A guy thinks that, right? Have this conversation with the CRD guys sometimes. They're like, oh, I want a woman who does this and does that. I'm like, no, you don't, right? That comes from brokenness. You think you do, but you don't, right? No man really truly wants a woman who's been a porn star or a stripper or any of that, because we're all human beings and we think, have you done this with somebody else? Right? Am I as good as someone else? You start doing these weird comparisons. So it's really a mess all around, and you cannot really just have sex with someone. And aside from that, there are consequences to doing something like that. Sexual transmitted diseases, and what we're going to see here, which is pregnancy. He doesn't follow suit of his sons, Judah. So she says, well, I would like your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. This is the staff that allows him to lead his sheep, a cord, right? A scarlet would have been like a scarlet cord, which was, he was carrying, and then his signet, which was his ring. And this is that, when you see old school, shows where they write letters and they seal them up and they put a, thing of wax on it and they put a ring down into it. This is his family signet. This means something. He's willing to leave these things with her because of what he wants. So she says, your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. Then he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. So, really sort of a stupid joke, but he's not as smart as his sons, right? He's a man. He's willing to give her whatever. So she arose and went away and laid aside her veil and put on her garments of her widowhood. She went home, went back to the life she was living. And Judah sent a young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adulamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand. But he did not find her. So he didn't go bring it back himself and get his signet and his cord and his staff. He sent his friend. Then he asked the men of the place, saying, where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside? They said, there was no harlot in this place. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. Also, the men of the place said there was no harlot in this place. I don't know. We don't have his text, so we don't really have context. I don't know if he was like, hey, dude, you're in trouble. There was no harlot there. There was something else going on, right? Or if he just merely saying the information. But in 23, it says, then Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we should be ashamed. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. So he says, well, look, you did what you're supposed to do. You tried to find her. We can't find her, and then she's going to have to move along. And 24 came to pass after about 3 months, or about 3 months after that, Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So what's interesting here is, the other thing about the ring, the signet. Ultimately, when he married someone, that would be given to it. It was so he's left it with her. He's not married her, but he's, this custom of giving the ring. So there's either some sort of investigation that's been continuing on, but it's somehow they have found out that Tamar was the harlot. So his friend, he's told to Judah that Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she's with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. So I don't know if at this point he's like, look, I need to hide the evidence. We're going to burn her. But that's rightfully so. She's clearly been sleeping with someone. It's interesting. Like, does he know yet? I don't know. Right? Is there did you get that pit in his stomach where it's like, uh-oh. I mean, I was with someone, and if she's the harlot, then that's my kid, right? Now's the time. We'll burn her, because ultimately she's been a problem. My kids have died because they wouldn't be with her. So he says, bring her out and let her be burned. For she was brought out. She sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. She said, please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff. I can imagine her smirking as she says that. Hey, I don't know whose these are. Let you determine it, let you figure it out, but this is whose child it is. So Judah, in 26, acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give to her Shelah, my son, and he never knew her again. Now, ultimately, he should have probably made right? Like, he would have burned her, would have been, out of it. Obviously, God has a plan, and God has order. And we've seen it many times through the book of Genesis, really looking at creation, right? There's hierarchy, there's order, there's a reason why that, God has created things in the way that he's created them, the process that he has. And, even way back then, microbiology was a thing, right? We didn't think about it, but as, ceremonial law will come into place, dealing with the blood of animals and dealing with different kinds of things, not just sleeping around. God's a genius. So he's known, God doesn't allow lies to continue on for too long before revealing them. And so she, sparing her life, she's smart enough to figure out that, look, if I'm going to be pregnant, I better have something, and this better get sorted out. Right? She wants a child, or children in this fact. So as he acknowledges them, he points out that she's more righteous than him. They're both wrong for doing it the way that they've done it. But Judah recognizes that he didn't do right by her twice. Ultimately, he didn't give her the son that he should have. And secondarily, he didn't treat her right in the way that he should have. He was her father-in-law, right? He's supposed to protect her, watch over her, take care of her. Now, granted, he didn't know, but now knowing it, he says, she's been more righteous than I, because I did not give her Shelah, my son. And out of fear, quite likely, to an extent, he didn't want to lose another son. This woman was like the black widow of women, apparently. The sons have all died. But the fact is that Tamar has really been used by two brothers and now the father, and, should have gotten the son Shelah to begin with. And he says he never knew her again. In 27, now came to pass at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was, when she was giving birth, that one put out his hand. The midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. And then it happened, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly. She said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. We know, based on the genealogy in Matthew, God is, building the line that the Son of God will come through the children that Judah and Tamar, had ultimately. This is a cool note. It says, as we read the Gospel of Matthew, it gives us the genealogy of Joseph, the husband of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The line happened to come through Perez, the son of Judah, and Tamar. The next woman listed is Rahab, the harlot in Jericho, then Ruth, the Moabite. At the last and the fourth woman named in the line of Christ is Bathsheba, the Hittite, the wife of David, who was formerly the wife of Uriah. 4 women are named in Christ's genealogy, each of them outside of the Jewish race, with rather shady pasts as well. This speaks to me of God's grace. Though we may not have the most honorable past, or just plain ashamed as we look, or we're just plain ashamed as we look back, God does not disqualify us or kick us out. He would rather wash us, forgive us, and then use us as trophies to his grace. It's a cool picture, right? That God, looking back on this, right, people would go, well, how could a perfect son of God come from a line of people like this? Right? And ultimately, that's how the Lord Jesus was looked at. Who is this? Jesus of Nazareth? Could anything good come out of that area? Right? We've talked about it before, right? When I was growing up, it was Glenburn. right? That was just Herman. I grew up, living in Bangor, my family in Herman, farming and doing that community, right? And Herman was different then. It was a quiet farming community. Glenburn was shady at best, right? But drugs were starting there. Alcoholism ran rampant. It's not like it's not everywhere, but it was, I don't know. It was like, oh man, I'm never living in Glenburn. People's idea was to, graduate high school, get an old car or truck and get a trailer and live in Glenburn and just party and have fun. I was like, man, I don't ever want to do that. And Orrington was not a farming community, but it was like this, man, it wasn't upscale, but it was out in the country, but not farmland, fancier, I guess. So I always wanted to live in Orrington. We moved back to Maine, ultimately, Calvary Chapel, Bangor, being in Orrington, was like, we're going to move into Orrington. That's the place we want to be. And that's where God had for us. When we went out into Herman, it wasn't the same, right? Herman's now even different over the last 10 years. There's so much money flowing through there. It's super political. It's not farmland anymore. It's not farming country. It's very different. The schools are rougher in the sense of cliques and money and all of that kind of stuff. It's just different. And I've said it before, you drive through Herman, it doesn't even smell the same. It used to smell like grass and hay or manure, which, that's farmland. That's what it smells like. There's something comforting to me about that. But where you come from, especially in that culture, means something, right? What family you've come from, what line you've come from, what area you came from, and Abraham, knowing what Canaan would do and what the Canaanite culture would do to his family, wanted them kept out of that. And yet, here they are, still back into it again. Yet, and this is my Pastor Chuck Bible, Pastor Chuck makes a good point here, right? And the reminder that even looking through the genealogy of Christ, expecting a perfect group of people is an incorrect expectation to begin with. And ultimately, it does show God's mercy and God's grace to use people regardless of where they've come from, right? He uses the worst of circumstances to make the greatest of stories. And he does that in all of our lives. We don't always see the end. That's, one of the things that most of the time we look at this family and we say, you're not really thinking about what this is going to do in the end, right? Judah wasn't, what if she gets pregnant? What are you going to do, right? I'm probably never going to know. A man thinking the wrong way, right? It's just hormonal, doesn't really think about the future or think about those things. They just do whatever. Culture's even worse today with that. We do whatever, and we never really look back on it. We don't stop often to think, what does this mean and what effect could this have? So, as we read through, I think back on it now, it's like, oh man, this is one of these weird chapters that it seems so odd. We go from Joseph being sold as slave to the natural place we should go is Joseph's life. And we stop in this in-between story. But it's important, right? God has this in the book of Genesis because this is ultimately where the line of that Christ will come from. Right? And it does show mercy and grace. Yeah, what's in there? I was going to dig into 39 a little bit, but we'll pick back up next week with Joseph. Father, thank you for this time. Lord, the reminder that even in the worst of circumstances, even in choices that we make that are terrible, even in things that have happened to us that are not our choice, there have been great evils put upon us by other people. Sometimes sexual in nature, sometimes abusive, sometimes somebody using for some other purpose. That as we can see through the corruption that Adam and Eve, that started with Adam and Eve, that through the generations, even through the life of our Lord, the generations, that some evils have been put upon people, some have made these choices and brought them upon themselves. But you don't look at the past and say, well, that person can't be used anymore. You're not like us. That's what we do. We go, well, that person couldn't be a church person or a pastor or a leader or a women's leader or a president or even a good business person or anything. We judge people based on where they come from or the past that they've come from, not by where they are in life or what you might be doing in their lives. You didn't call the greatest of men in history, called all the people that are all messed up. You're apostles. They weren't highly educated, seminary degreed people. Lord, you called fishermen. Just what seems like random people. You called a Levite priest who had left the Jewish people because of their hypocrisy and became a tax collector for the Romans. You had a doctor in there. Luke is his fantastic coverage in writing. But all of these men, they would go on to give their lives for you. They would be persecuted, killed, murdered for standing up for you. And Lord, when you went to the cross, that's what you did for us. You stood up for all of time, for everything that had happened up until that point, and everything that would happen in the future. Think about it, like one day we're going to stand in heaven, and the God of all creation is going to see us not as sinners with a massive past of stuff that needs to be answered for. They're going to see us as being cleaned and saved by your Son, by you. And then we're going to be in heaven with you. Lord, may we not be mired down by the things in the past, whether it was 20 or 30 years ago or history, or whether it was just last week. The enemy, he means to do that. Joseph's going to say what the enemy, essentially what the enemy means for evil, God meant for good. He's going to go on through a hard, long life of struggle and battle. And he's going to seek, he's going to find forgiveness for his family, for all the things that have happened, for all the people in his past. He's going to learn that. He's going to show mercy and grace. He's going to mimic what you do for us. He's not going to hold them to all that they did. And neither do you. That's what our enemy does. You don't hold us for being rude last week or making a mistake in our past. None of those things. We bring them to you. You want to clean us. You want to change us. Forgive us. Move us on. That we might become closer to you and we might go on to tell others. You have a use for us. Lord, thank you so much that you loved us, that you gave your life for us, that you'd even put a story like this in here. We could go back and reflect on it and say, even in the worst of decisions and mistakes, you bring good out of them. And that's what you'll do. Man, a long time from this point, thousands of years. You will bring your Son into the world, perfect, fully God and fully man. And he will spend 33 years on this planet, giving us all that we need to go to the cross. May it be one day, Lord, that if we have to face persecution, then we have to take a cross. And if the enemy brings that back and wants to use that, may we be much like Peter. And legend says that he didn't even want to be on there right side up because he didn't want to be compared with you. He wanted to be upside down. May we take everything from the world can throw at us and stand firm in what our belief is, stand firm in who we are. May we impart that to our kids, these kids in the next room, Lord, playing games and fellowshipping, learning about each other. Maybe give them the moral law that you have given us, the things that we still stand by, not all the ceremonial stuff. Lord, you came and you ended all that. The moral stuff still stands. You made all of those commandments into two. Love God and love your neighbor. May we give that to them. May they have a good moral compass. May we teach them as we go what good character is. Making the right decision even in the hardest of times. Doing what's right even when no one's looking. Treating others as the way we want to be treated. We'd look to you for that example. We'd teach them that. To look to you in any given situation. You've left us with everything we need in this book. And ultimately, at the end, Lord, we'd also teach them perseverance. That through the trials and the struggles, that they would not give up. That they would not just listen to the enemy and say, well, no, I'm worthless now. I've made the worst mistake in my life and there's no coming back for it. There always is room for redemption with you. always. Doesn't matter what it is. Thank you for everything, Lord. Thank you for all that you do. And as we depart from here, Lord, I pray you'd bless the time we have now. I pray you'd bless the time the kids have had. And I pray you'd bless tonight. Or until we meet again on the next Lord's Day and we continue in your word. We continue talking about contending earnestly for the things that we believe, things that you have called. Thank you so much for everything. We give you all the praise and all the glory in Jesus' mighty name.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray this teaching has been a blessing to you. If you have any questions or would like to request prayer, you can visit us online at www.cccorinth.org. If you're local, come join us for a service at 125 School Road in Charleston, Maine. We want to remind you that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God. Remain armored up, and until next time, grace and peace.